I go.
Okay, we're good.
So my teaching today is titled, It's Not About You. And last week, one of our esteemed ladies was sharing about an event in her life where God shared with her, it's not about you, so she could deal with a difficult situation. And I'm always thankful when she shares because I feel like her wisdom that she's imparting is being given for me in preparation. Well, I would not know how impacting that statement would be until later that day. Because when God tells you something twice, it's established. And because he did, an understanding started opening up for me that I have always wanted to know and had never been able to figure out or achieve. But the second statement comes from decades ago. And I wouldn't know it until later that afternoon because I was reviewing about a group of young men that lived in 1936 who were impoverished, had grown up very ragtag, some of them living in shanties. The Depression was at the height of its time. But these young men, they would rise up to make international history. And I love stuff like that because this is true. This isn't a fictional history. This is a true story of these young men's lives. But it all begins with a dream of having a life out of poverty, want, hunger, clothes so worn out that the patches need patches. And yet 8 separate, desperate cases needed to become a cohesive one. And they would be the boys in the boat. Now, you may recognize that title because this movie is out now, and I would encourage everybody to go see it. The book, however, is always better. One of the characters that's highlighted in the movie is Joe Rance. Now, Joe Rance is a freshman or sophomore. I can't really recall which grade he was in college at this point. But at 14, his father abandoned him. He had remarried and his present wife had 2 sons, and they decided they couldn't feed all those mouths. So they left him at the roadside and drove away. But he would get the chance of a lifetime at the University of Washington when they would choose him and 7 others to be their JV rowing team. So a rowing team is comprised of 8 rowers and a coxswain, which they just simply call the cox, C-O-X. Each rower is measured for skill and longevity of energy output, and each seat in the boat has a specialty. Seats 1 and 2 are the bow pair. Well, they set the balance, and they have to have a smooth, fluid technique between the 2 of them. Seats 3, 4, 5, 6 are the engine room. They're the go power. They're the row well and live. 7 and 8, they're the stern pair, with number 8 being the best racer in the boat. Joe Rance was number 7. Number 8 sat right in front of him, and the coxswain sat right in front of them. And the coxswain, he steers the boat, and he spots for rowing errors, and he'll correct those in the middle of the row so that they can get back fluid. They need that fluid motion through all 8 if they want to win. And he's the one that executes the coach's game plan. So the rowers are placed in the boat as it pleases the coach. 1 Corinthians 12:18, our coach has also placed us. But now hath God set the members, every one of them, in the body as it hath pleased him. It pleased God where he put you. You are going to set a balance, or you're going to be part of an engine room, or you're going to be the guy that's the best racer in the boat. Whatever position you're in that body, God placed you there, and it pleased him. And when God puts you somewhere, that's the best place to be. Well, this team was so well constructed that they displaced the varsity team. See, when you're coming from behind, you're rowing with everything you got. These boys had nothing. They didn't want to go back to nothing. They wanted to exceed and excel. Well, the JV team, they had already had great times and races won, and they were sort of just floating along on their accomplishments. That's why they displaced the JV team. So the varsity team, I'm sorry, they displaced the varsity team. So this JV team ends up racing in the regional races, and they race for a spot in what was called then the Poughkeepsie Regatta, because the Poughkeepsie Regatta race is the one that allows you to place for the Olympic trials. Well, they win. The underdog, they win, and they go to the Poughkeepsie Regatta, and they win that too. And they win their place in the Olympic trials of 1936 that took place in Berlin, the same one where Owens raced and won all those ones, the same one where Louis Zamperini raced and won his race, the same one where God was trying to tell Hitler, don't go to war, you're going to lose. But he wouldn't listen. So Joe, he's riding this wave of exaltation. He gets to the Olympics, and they're out there doing their trials on the water, getting used to the water and stuff. And his past rises up and slaps him in the face, causes his head to question all the good that had happened. His father deserted him, yet his stepmother had 2 boys that weren't an orphan, just Joe. Was he really worth all this? Was he good enough? So he begins to seriously contemplate quitting, and he almost does. But his coach says this, and I quote it. Listen, I know it isn't easy to trust every other person on that boat as much as you trust yourself, but it's not about you. As good as you are, it's not about you, Joe, or me, or anybody else. It's about the boat. See, it's not about you. You're unique, you're precious, you've been given enablements, and yes, God values you highly. But it's not about you. It's about the body of Christ. It's about the will of God. Philippians 2:13 says, for it is God which worketh in you, both to will and to do of his good pleasure. It's about God's good pleasure. It's about the body of Christ. Well, Joe doesn't quit, and the team goes on to the greatest upset in rowing history, winning the gold medal. A bunch of ragtag down and outers, living in shanty towns, working at any job just to stay in college, and they became America's heroes. Years later, when Joe is asked about rowing with 8, he says he rowed with 1. They became unified in heart, soul, mind, and strength, and they were unstoppable. So are you. It's about doing the greater works of John 14:12. What position in the boat do you have? Are you one who sets balance? Are you the muscle? It's not about you. It's about the boat. And I want to thank Lillian Havis for sharing her wisdom and understanding that has enabled me to finally see what it means to empty you of yourself. Empty you of yourself. God knows the desires and wants of your life, and he's going to provide them as you do what pleases him. Empty me of myself. And finally, just let that Spirit of God reign and have God tell me where he wants me to go, what he wants me to do, and how he wants me to do it. And God knows he needs to be specific because I'm a little dense. But it's about the boat. It's not about me. And so even though this is a short one today, I just want to thank you all for the time to share it. I got this written out in 20 minutes after I realized what God was doing. And thank you for little Heidi and Kaylin for the opportunity to share. God bless you, ladies.